call this fraternity prank. Also, the Pope decided today to release Vatican-related bath products. An incredible thing. Yes, it's the new Pope on a rope. It's right, Pope on a rope. Wash with it, go straight to heaven. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Bill Roach. This is another episode of Timeless Dialogues, and today we're going to be asking this question: what in the world is going on with Christian nationalism? Now, for many of you, you realize, especially if you live on Christian Twitter, that you're seeing this debate take place, and you're asking yourself, why are these people debating over? What does this term mean? Who's actually in charge? Do they want a Protestant Franco? Do they want blasphemy laws? And so much more. And what I want to do today is I want to discuss this issue, and I want you to realize this: we have been played. And what I mean by that is that so many people think that we as evangelicals are controlling the narrative arc of what's going on within the broader Christian nationalism debate. And what I want to see here, and I want you to see here, is that in this debate, there are so many outside controlling factors that are creating this horizontal debate amongst one another, all the while they're achieving their long-term vertical goals. So how I want to do this is I want to start out with this analogy. I want you to see what's going on. And once we see this, I think it's going to help us understand how this entire narrative arc game is being played. So for years throughout my life, I've participated in a variety of different martial arts: striking martial arts, grappling martial arts, you name it, and I've done it. And one of the things that you try to do within martial arts, which I think you try to do within a variety of different sports, is you try to create dilemmas. You try to create these positions in which whomever your opponent is, they feel like they only have two options. Why? Because you can control what's going on, and in many respects, if you're actually good enough, you can actually get your opponent to almost choose the way they're going to lose the match. And here's what I mean by this. So within grappling martial arts, we have all these different ways of which you can control a person, and you can get them into these dilemmas where there's one submission or the other. And depending on how you position yourself, their arm's going to move a particular way or their head's going to move a particular way, and then bam, you can get the submission. And this is exactly what I want you to see that's going on. Within this entire Christian nationalist debate, we're being put in this position in which there's a dilemma, and you either pick one option or the other option. And what they're usually looking for is that your reaction is usually the action that they were striving for. So when you see this debate come about, you're going to see some figures say, you know, it's either Christian nationalism or drag queen story hour. You're tired of seeing people at your libraries or on the streets trying to convince your kids to be, you know, transgender or LGBTQ or any of these other things, right? Well, what's the solution? The solution is Christian nationalism. So then what do? Your reaction is really the action that they're looking for. They're looking for you to take this false dilemma and to become a Christian nationalist. Now, in addition to it, what we find is that people are giving us all of these different dilemmas because, like we said, the action is the real reaction, but they're also giving us these things where the whole debate is taking place in what I'm calling a pseudo reality, a hyper reality. And by that, I mean, we live in a postmodern age. We live in an age of linguistic manipulations, and we live in an age in which those linguistic manipulations are used so that you can have different power plays that kind of go into play and take force with it. And what I want you to see is that this is sort of a feature that has taken place within Western society, but in particular within the American context. So let's think about over the last few years about how outside governing forces use these mechanisms in order to achieve their end goals. And the first one is this. Think about the idea of the term woke. What's going on with the concept of wokeness and say Resolution 9 within the Southern Baptist Convention, or CRT within your local schools? And somebody's going to raise this whole conversation. They're going to say, well, I think that our school board is going woke. Or they're going to say something like, I think the entire convention is buying into critical race theory. And what do they immediately start to do? They get into this whole conversation about, well, what do you mean by critical race theory? How would critical race theory look like? Well, we're not teaching critical race theory. And all the while, what's going on is we're having this horizontal debate that's taking place with one another while they're achieving the end goals of ramming Resolution 9 into the convention, or getting your local school board to buy into cultural Marxism, or getting your library to endorse, the wokeness by changing out its books and all the rest. So my point is that these vertical debates, in order to distract you, are used as means to achieve vertical goals, end-time goals of rewriting laws, changing school board positions, changing denominational positions, and so much more. So let's use another analogy of this, because I think once you start to see it, you're going to understand exactly what I mean by this. So what if I were to tell you that I could develop a form of insurance in which you're going to have the government give you a massive stipend for it, you're going to have better health care, more localized health care that's going to suit your needs, and listen here, you will be able to keep your doctor. We remember that? We're all familiar with that, because that's exactly the line that Barack Obama used to sell Obamacare to the United States of America. He used these horizontal debates all the while he was completely, utterly running the ball in to achieve his vertical goal of radically restructuring a massive segment of the American economy, who has control over that economy, and ultimately whether or not you have control over your personal health care. My point is this, is that in each of these kinds of moments, we are being played. People are trying to achieve greater goals through our disrupting and dismantling amongst us. So what I want to do is I want to put up this little picture here, because it helps explain more of what's going on. So much of understanding Western society is to understand things like this. We live in a world in which ideas have consequences and ideas have origins. And we have to understand where these ideas come from and how they actually function so we don't fall for them again. And what this is this sort of the classic illustration of Hegel's dialectic. And what you have to see is that there's a horizontal dialectic and a vertical dialectic, and they work sort of hand in glove with one another. So how the horizontal aspect of it works is you create these theses and antitheses, these opposites that react with one another. They push back with one another, but all while doing so, you have one that's here and one that's there, and they come together and they achieve their higher goal. And then you have another dilemma, and it achieves another higher goal. Well, the whole point of it is that we're striving for the top point of Hegel's dialectic, the vertical end goal. And every horizontal debate that takes place ultimately works to fulfill that telos, that end goal, that end purpose for which it was designed. And when you add in the fact that today we live in a world that's not only idealistic, it's not only dialectic, but it's postmodern, and that there's power plays that are taking place within postmodernism, we live in a world in which it's almost a pseudo-reality of horizontal dialectics to achieve narrative arc goals for whatever power play they're striving for. So let's use the wokeness again. You have an idealistic postmodern sort of neo-Marxist philosophy that's ultimately creating this disruption and dismantling within society between different racial groups. But what was the end goal of it? The end goal was race Marxism, whether it's the redistribution of wealth or the reparations of wealth and all of the rest. The point is that if you can get people debating these concepts and pitted against one another, you can achieve your end goals. And this is precisely what's going on within this whole Christian nationalist debate. You have people that are fulfilling the vertical goals, all while arguing with one another on these horizontal aspects. And this is exactly what it is. You have these linguistic dilemmas. You have these linguistic manipulations that are taking place upon us. And this is exactly how Hegel's dialectic works. They're using the horizontal confusion in order to achieve vertical goals. So let's draw this parallel a little bit more. So within wokeness, we've already seen the confusion. And within Christian nationalism, we see the exact same confusion. So what do you mean by Christian nationalism? You've got Stephen Wolf's definition. You've got Christianity Today's definition. You've got what may be the standard liberal leftist definition of it. You've got Puritan millennialism. You've got maybe Lincoln's republicanism, which is a form of it, according to Marsden. You've got different versions with Woodrow Wilson on what the New Deal may be, the coming into it. You've got the post-millennial concepts within liberalism of we're bringing in a healthier, better society. You've got all of these different definitions of Christian nationalism, and you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? Is it just because there's these fundamental disagreements, or because nobody can, understand what we mean by the definition? One person saying, oh, Christian nationalism is nothing more than Christian morality in society. And then you got another person that's saying, no, Christian nationalism is ultimately going to be, blasphemy laws. It's going to fundamentally alter what we mean by religious freedom and freedom of speech and all of these different things, because we're going to have a Christian prince and all the rest, or we need to have a Protestant Franco and much, much more. Now let's think about what's going on. We've already discussed this idea of narrative arcs. And what I'm ultimately saying is that all of this debate about what is Christian nationalism, how do we understand this? We've got good brothers on each side. Can't we all lock arms and just sit down at the table and have a conversation? Well, that would sound really nice. But what I want you to see is that all of this debate on Twitter, or, Christian Narnia land on Twitter and all the rest is, again, it's the linguistic manipulation. You are being played. You are giving these little sort of dilemmas, and you're having to pick one or the other. All the while, they're running their end goal straight down and achieving their vertical dilemma, their vertical aspects of the dialectic. Another thing that I want you to see is that this whole issue of who controls the narrative arc on this. And I know many of the Christian nationalists say, well, we control the definition of this. And I just go, well, factually, you really don't. You've got different definitions that are out there, but you haven't changed the definition in the media. You haven't changed the definition before the federal government. You haven't changed the definition within the minds of many people in local churches, the people in the pews. You haven't changed the definitions within the evangelical seminaries. You get a few people who have loud voices and a few platforms that are giving a particular definition. But the reality is that's one of the many different definitions. You are not controlling the narrative arc. You're reacting within the narrative arc. Your real action that they want is your reaction. So another thing that I want you to see is this. Within the whole Christian nationalist debate, you're starting to find another parallel within the wokeism. And within the woke sort of debate, have you ever noticed you'd sit down with somebody and you'd start talking about this, and we want to be good and we want to define our terms and we want to discuss these things. So then somebody goes, well, what do you really mean by wokeness? And you respond, you give your definition of what's going on, and they go, well, I don't think that's what wokeness is. So-and-so defines it here, and so defines it there. And you don't have the epistemic privileged place to actually discuss what it is, because maybe you're a white man, or you're a Protestant. You just don't understand, because what do we really mean by wokeness? And then you go get a definition, and that's not a good definition. Notice what's going on. Again, the horizontal dialectic is taking place, but ultimately what's going on is that you're never actually able to talk about wokeness unless you're part of the privileged class of the proper race, who has the proper critical consciousness, who's been through the proper diversity training. Remember, diversity training is really the training in critical consciousness. Or you don't have the right inclusive concepts, namely, you're not willing to exclude those who buy into these concepts here. And this is exactly what we're starting to see in a very functional sense with the debate that's taking place within Christian nationalism. You can't really define it. Oh, yes, you've never done the proper research. You're just an amateur on this. You don't understand the context of these words and all the rest. But all the while, they're still achieving their end goals. This is exactly how the woke movement worked. Nobody could actually define the terms because only the privileged few have the epistemic ability to control the definition of the term. And my whole point is, well, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If the woke are playing this game and we call it out, why are we going to allow the Christian nationalists to play this game and we not call them out? The point is that we're not going to play the linguistic manipulation game. We're going to stop playing that game. We're going to see it for exactly what it's worth, and we're not going to allow us to continue the narrative arc of what the postmodern manipulation is actually trying to achieve. So another way to think of it is this. When they get on all of these little tangential issues of you can't define it, or you don't understand this, or you haven't done the research, all these other things, we've been played. You are being played when you fall for that. We have proper definitions. We know exactly what they're trying to do with this. We know exactly the end goals of what they're trying to do with the Constitution, or with blasphemy laws, or freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and all the rest. We know exactly what's going on. So do not fall for it. So let's keep looking here. We're almost finishing up here. So we understand the concept of linguistic goals and power plays. And what they seek to do is they seek to intentionally cause strife and pit people against one another. So now you're a Christian nationalist. Now you're not a Christian nationalist. And we spend all of this time falling for this pitting against one another, in which they're fulfilling that. They're using that to disrupt and dismantle for the end goals of balkanization, which is taking place within Western society in many respects. You know, the blue states keep getting bluer and the red states keep getting redder, and we need to move to the different areas and make our super Christian society here and our super liberal society there in order to have parallel economies and all the rest. We've seen all of this. We understand all of this. But what I want you to see is that the people who are doing this from the Christian nationalist side, they're not uneducated people. They realize what's going on the global scale. We realize what the World Economic Forum is doing. We understand what's going on with China, and we understand what's going on with all of these other countries in which there's this desire to disrupt and dismantle, to have parallel societies, balkanizations within societies. And really what they're doing is they're trying to get one step up on them. They're almost granting that premise, and they're trying to enter into that society in a privileged position, when our real response should be, don't ever give me that kind of society. I don't want to give up my constitutional liberties. I don't want to give up my individual freedoms. I'm not going to use this whole mechanism in order to achieve that end. I'm not falling for it. I'm not playing for it. In addition, what we find is that these linguistic games are the cause of people to live in a pseudo-reality and fall for the intentional power plays. So let's give another sort of example of this. You have a football field, and let's just say the end goal is that every person you can get onto the football field, you can then create a situation in which you can control them. So for example, this is a tactic that can be used within war. You draw your enemy out, and then you attack them. So let's just say we're going to go out there and we're going to give all of these different definitions of Christian nationalism. Everybody's going to put on the hat. And each time they put on a hat, they go out into the field. And whenever we come up with our ad hoc number for whatever's going to change or fulfill our narrative arc, we let them get out there, and then we proverbially pull the trigger. We cause the game to take place. So we can think of an example of this where, you know, we talk about Fed jobs. And this is exactly what I think is going on here, is that the people who are controlling this within the greater sphere of the conversation are the media and the federal government and all the rest. And what they're doing is you're noticing this. Everybody who's seen as sort of like a right-wing conservative person is a Christian nationalist right now. So if they can get enough people to put on the label, whether it's good Christian morality, or they dress right in society, or they fulfill the idea of getting rid of the transgenderism, and then all of a sudden an event occurs. Whatever that event may be, it could be, as one person talks about it, trans Floyd, where you have some transgender person that gets beaten or killed or something, and it's done by a Christian nationalist. So you have all these people that associate with this, and then what do? They bring legislation against it in that movement. Looks familiar. We've seen this happen before. So that's one scenario of how this pseudo-reality, we're buying into it, the linguistic manipulations, we're just doing this, it comes back to bite you. They cause horizontal confusion in order to achieve vertical goals. The other one is this, and this is another one that I see taking place, is that you have several figures who realize that the evangelical voter bloc is a powerful voter bloc. Now, it's gotten smaller over the last several years, but it's still very powerful. But what happens if we can split that voter bloc? What if the left can split that voter bloc? They can achieve their end goals. So let's just say you have 10 people that represents the voter bloc, and 4 of them are leftists, and they're always going to vote for issues on the left. And then you've got these figures, the other 6, that are conservative. Maybe they're not perfectly unified, but they're generally unified on whatever the issues may be. Now, obviously, people might say it's a different direction. This is the point of an analogy. But what if we could take those 6 and somehow split them so that they're no longer a unified voter bloc? So now they're arguing about specifics of different definitions. All the while, they're not voting the same way that they used to. There's a disruption and a dismantling in order to achieve long-term goals. And what does that mean? The left is going to win. So then you take your average church and they start being split on wokeism and then Christian nationalism. And now these churches are smaller and they have less money and they have less influence in society and the voter bloc is split. Who's ultimately winning that? The left. In addition to this, do we actually think that Christian nationalism in our current and cultural context is really going to win? You think it's really going to achieve its goals? I don't think so, because I don't think that it's designed to do so. The narrative arc is designed to disrupt and dismantle the right. And then when they're done with it, namely when they've pretty much bitten everybody's heads off, they're just going to achieve their vertical end goals of Marxism in society, the left's totalitarian ideals, and so on and so forth. You see my point? So what do we need to do with this? First of all, you need to call out the manipulations and stop the narrative arcs. You need to see when people are playing these games on Twitter. Oh, so-and-so never talks about blasphemy laws. Quote them, show the manipulations, show that what they're doing is they're trying to keep us discussing all of these things when all the while they want a real Protestant Franco, they want real totalitarian concepts, and they're wanting to undermine the concepts of religious freedom and the liberty that are given to us and freedom of speech. This is what the end goals are. In addition, don't argue with them about all of these little petty definitions. Rather, discuss the end goals of the narrative arc. We could spend all day, what do you mean by Christian nationalism? Is so-and-so a Christian nationalist? Well, they're a good people. There are good brothers on the side of Christian nationalism. That's all one great big distraction. When we really need to be asking things such as, do you still want to have constitutional liberties that are given to us? Would you enact blasphemy laws on people who differ with your understanding of Christianity? Where are people who differ with your view going to live? Are they going to have freedoms that are given to them? What are you going to do with the First and Second Amendments and constitutional liberties that we have within this? What do you want to do with things such as the financial aspects that we have governing our society? Do you want to have parallel economies and so on and so forth? These are the questions that we need to be asking, not all of these little petty things that's going on. In addition to it, we don't need to fall for the manipulations of you haven't read and you haven't done this. The reality is that we can all read. Several of us were recognized figures as working in the fields of apologetics and so forth. Like, I understand how the game works. I understand how to quote something in context. In fact, one of my old mentors used to say, most people who are within the evangelical world, when you call them out on something, they usually go, oh, it's out of context. When we all know it's in context, we're not falling for that manipulation. In addition, sometimes propositions, when you just hear them quoted, you go, that's nuts. And that's specifically what's going on. Like all these blasphemy law things, you look at it and you're like, what are these guys doing? Context or not, that proposition in and of itself is ridiculous. In addition, this is what I want you to see here, is realize that so much of what's going on in social media is a very well orchestrated sort of struggle session in order to get you to either stop engaging or to change your position or give up or whatever. The point is that struggle sessions are designed to re-educate and get you to change your actions so that the theory and the actions are put into place. So let's just think about how this works. You've got all these guys on Twitter who are labeling themselves as Christian nationalists, and you look at the page and you're like, this is a fake account. Or you're going to say, this account really seems like a real person who's unwilling to put their name on that fake account. And what you're finding is that these fake accounts come off and they're usually saying like the Bailey claims, like they're saying the crazy stuff that they actually believe, whereas the real people are saying the nice and sophisticated. So see, this is what we're trying to do. We're the nice, kind person. But then you look at these crazy accounts, you're like, oh, this is actually where the literature is pointing. Now, another thing that you have to see is that there are accounts by key figures who have also secondary accounts that are sort of their unnamed sources, or they don't have their real face on the account. They're their fake accounts. And I've actually seen guys have dialogues where the nice guy uses one account, then he goes into his other account and he says the crazy thing that he really wants to say, and they keep the dialogue going. It also gives the appearance as though like there's this reflexive moment that people are seeing it, there's a buzz that's going on with it, and so on and so forth. And if you're one of those guys, like if you're somebody that wants like integrity and you want to be able to engage in the conversation and you want to see the purity of the church and all the rest, get rid of your fake account. Like, and if your son-in-law or your son has one, tell them to get rid of it too. Like, we're not falling for those games. We see exactly what they are. They're well-orchestrated struggle sessions that are taking place in order to further the whole conversation and the dialogue. In addition to this, you got to realize that there are people who are in groups that all kind of say, okay, go. And they all respond to specific tweets. They promote their tweets. They promote their videos and all the rest. This is just something that takes place. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to say it's good or bad. That's just the reality of the world in which we live. So if it looks like a well-organized, intentional sort of struggle session or dialogue or whatever that's taking place on the internet, guess what? It probably is. And if you're seeing so-and-so give the perfect response to this and the perfect response, or all of a sudden, you're like, man, that guy has no training in that field, but yet he has knowledge on it. Why? They're all pooling their knowledge and all of their claims in order to orchestrate this conversation that's taking place. So let's finish with this here. What I want you to realize is that we've been played. We're falling for the linguistic manipulation. We're falling for the vertical and the horizontal dialectic. And what do we need to do? Stop falling for it. Stop falling for what's going on. So what's going on with Christian nationalism right now? We're all being played in the dialectic. So what do you need to do? You need to say, I know that manipulation. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I see. And guess what? You're not going to keep having me fall for it. I'm not going to keep falling for the game. So with that, what I want you to do is see what's going on and fall for it no more.